Richard Harlow was the kind of man people admired from a distance but feared up close. He had climbed from nothing to become a real estate mogul worth millions, building an empire brick by brick. But in the quiet corners of his heart, there was a part of him that no amount of wealth could touch, a wound that had never healed. His daughter Emily had been born with a rare spinal condition. She was beautiful, bright blue eyes, a curious smile, a mind sharp for her age, but her legs had never taken a step. Richard had taken her to the best hospitals in New York, flown her to Switzerland for specialist consultations, and even paid for experimental therapies in Germany. Each time he heard the same careful, measured words, "I'm sorry, Mr. Harlow, she will never walk." The mansion he had built for his family felt like a gilded cage. Emily's wheelchair moved silently through endless marble hallways, past towering windows that looked out at a world she could only imagine exploring. She would often sit by the living room window, watching other children run, jump, and fall, and sometimes she would whisper to herself, "I wonder what that feels like." When Emily's mother passed away unexpectedly from illness, the light in the little girl's eyes dimmed even further. Richard was heartbroken, but his grief hardened into a strict, overprotective shell. He couldn't bear to see Emily disappointed again, so he avoided talking about walking at all. He poured his energy into keeping her comfortable, tutors, toys, art supplies, but never hope. When he decided to hire a full-time nanny, it wasn't about replacing a mother figure. It was about finding someone who could keep Emily safe and happy in his absence. He interviewed over 20 candidates, scrutinizing every resume, every reference, and every smile. Then came Sarah Miller. She was in her late 20s, with warm brown eyes, chestnut hair usually tied in a loose bun, and a quiet confidence that seemed to fill the room without being overwhelming. She didn't try to impress him with fancy words. Instead, she asked about Emily's favorite stories, her favorite foods, the things that made her laugh. It was the first time in a long time Richard saw someone look at Emily not with pity, but with genuine interest. She was hired. From her very first day, Sarah broke the unspoken rule in the Harlow mansion. She treated Emily like any other child. She didn't hover nervously around the wheelchair. She didn't rush to do things for her unless Emily asked. Instead, she encouraged her to try small things herself, opening a door, reaching for a glass of water, stretching her arms out to grab a book from a shelf. Richard noticed, and he didn't like it. One evening, he pulled Sarah aside and said, "Don't give her false hope. She's been through enough disappointment. Just make her happy." Sarah smiled politely, but her mind was already made up. She had worked at a children's rehabilitation center during college and had seen countless cases where doctors' predictions were wrong. She knew Emily's condition was serious, but she also knew the human body sometimes hid its strength until it was tested. It started small. One afternoon, Sarah noticed something strange. As Emily laughed hard during a silly game, her toes twitched. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She didn't mention it to Richard. Instead, she began introducing tiny challenges into Emily's daily life, always disguised as play. When they colored on the living room rug, Sarah would place crayons just far enough for Emily to lean forward. When they listened to music, she encouraged Emily to tap her feet to the beat. Sometimes, she would playfully push the wheelchair backward a little, asking Emily to push against the footrest to stop herself. Emily thought it was just part of the fun, but Sarah was waking up muscles that had been dormant for years. Progress was slow. Some days Emily would get frustrated, pushing the crayons away and crossing her arms. "It's no use," she would mutter. "I'm broken." On those days, Sarah would sit beside her and tell her stories of people who had done things everyone said were impossible, mountain climbers without legs, musicians who played despite losing their hands, dancers who had once been paralyzed. She planted seeds of belief. The biggest challenge was Emily. It was Richard. He didn't understand Sarah's methods, and more than once, he caught her in the middle of an exercise and told her to stop. "You're just setting her up for disappointment," he warned. Sarah kept her voice calm but firm, "Or maybe I'm setting her up for a miracle." Everything changed on a rainy afternoon in early spring. Emily was at the window, watching raindrops race down the glass, when she asked softly, "Do you think I'll ever be able to run outside like those kids?" Sarah looked her straight in the eyes. "I think you can do more than you believe." Richard, who had walked in unnoticed, heard the exchange. His face darkened. "I told you not to promise her things you can't deliver," he said sharply. Emily flinched at his tone. Sarah didn't back down. "And I'm telling you, Mr. Harlow, she's stronger than you think." They stood there, locked in a silent battle of belief versus fear. Richard turned and walked out, muttering under his breath. From that day, Sarah stopped waiting for his approval. She began holding dance mornings, where she and Emily would put on upbeat music and move together. At first, Emily only swayed from her chair. Then she began shifting her weight forward, planting her feet on the floor for balance. Sarah encouraged her to imagine herself walking, to feel each step in her mind before she took it. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, Emily's legs responded more. She could stand for a few seconds when holding onto something. She could shuffle sideways with help. Sarah kept it secret from Richard, wanting the moment of truth to be undeniable. The moment came on Emily's 9th birthday. The living room was filled with balloons and the scent of vanilla cake. A few close friends and relatives had gathered. Sarah had planned a little game for Emily, one she knew might just change everything. She got down on the rug with Emily and whispered, "Do you trust me?" Emily nodded eagerly. Sarah helped her to her feet. This wasn't the first time Emily had stood, but it was the first time in front of others. Sarah loosened her grip, just enough for Emily to bear her own weight. The room went quiet. Richard, carrying a tray of drinks, stopped mid-step, his eyes widening. Emily's face was pale, her body trembling, but then one foot moved forward, just an inch, then another. Sarah didn't speak, didn't rush to steady her. Emily took a third step, then a fourth. Gasps filled the room. Richard dropped the tray, glass shattering on the floor. By the time Emily reached him, she collapsed into his arms. Richard held her tightly, tears streaming down his face. "I see you, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you," he whispered, his voice breaking. Later, after the guests had left and Emily was resting, Richard found Sarah in the kitchen. For a long moment, he just stood there, his hands in his pockets. Finally, he said, "You went against everything I told you, and I've never been more grateful." From that day forward, Richard became part of Emily's daily therapy. Together, the three of them worked toward a future no one had dared imagine before. Emily still had a long road ahead, but the sound of her footsteps, uneven, shaky, but real, became the soundtrack of the Harlow home. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person refusing to believe in, never, to change a life forever.